With Tom and Di joining us on the show, the Reverend Frank Ritchie. Frank, this is a little awkward because today we're talking about Tom. Thomas. Thomas, yeah.
Do I need to step out?
Well, I'm wondering. Frank, please explain. Are we just going to have a little chat about Tom on the side, or what's happening today?
Yeah. We're gonna have a little conversation about Tom and the Bible, otherwise
nice.
known
Okay.
as Thomas, which is very relevant, obviously, for this show. And not only because of you, Tom, but also Di's son.
Yeah.
Tom.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Great name.
Well, let's be honest here, guys. It's not exactly an uncommon name over the generations, but it is interesting when you think about Thomas in the Bible, because you get these interactions after Jesus was resurrected before he ascended to heaven. And there's a very, quite prominent one when he does encounter the disciple Thomas.
Yeah, I'd like to have a conversation with Di, we should have this conversation.
Okay.
I'd love a conversation with any Christian who has called their son Thomas.
I just liked it. There was
Okay, well, hang on. I have to jump in here, Frank,
Okay.
because I did ask my dad, and he said, because you can see why you'd ask this question, because Thomas is known as Doubting Thomas. And he said, it wasn't about that. It was actually the fact that after Thomas encountered the resurrected Jesus, he said, my God, my Lord and my God. Yes. And I was like, wow, that was interesting. So as we reflect on the story, that's certainly the story behind the name, if you will, or why I had the name.
I personally actually think Thomas is one of the most beautiful characters in the Bible. I think he's one of the most relatable. I think Thomas, if we talk about Thomas as a saint, I think Thomas is the saint for all of us. And not only because of what he does, but what Jesus says following what he does. Mm-hmm. Now, let's get some context. So the tomb has been found empty. We're looking at John's Gospel, John chapter 20, verses 24 to 29. But in the lead up to this, Peter and John have headed along to the tomb. And in John's writing, it's very humorous because it makes out like Peter and John were racing and John gets there first. As the disciple that Jesus loved. Like there's all this talk about how awesome John is in John's gospel. And Peter goes in first, Mary Magdalene is in the mix, and then they vacate the premises, Peter and John. They've seen the empty tomb, they vacate the premises, and then we get this wonderfully intimate story of Mary looking for Jesus and being distraught that he's not there. She just sees someone that she thinks is the gardener. Turns out that that's Jesus. They have this wonderfully intimate moment. And that picture of Jesus as the gardener takes us back to the story of creation and God walking in the garden. And then we have a moment where the disciples are in the room together. They've locked the room because they're scared. Jesus appears in the room, says, peace be with you, has a bit of a discussion, breathes the Holy Spirit on them, which is really curious. Again, taking us back to that story of creation where God breathes into the first man. But there's someone who's not there. Thomas is not there. And I think we can only speculate, but it's worth speculating on why Thomas isn't there. Why is Thomas not with the other disciples? Has there been some breakdown in the relationship? Has he run off? What's going on there? Why is he not part of this moment of reconciliation? And then then they go and they tell Thomas that they've seen the risen Jesus. And then we get to this bit. So verse 24. But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands and put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand in his side, I will not believe. A week later, so there's not an immediate response to that. They're still hanging out a week after Thomas has said this. A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe. Thomas answered him, my Lord and my God. Jesus said to him, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet come to believe. So this wonderful story of Jesus reconciling Thomas into the situation and giving him exactly what he needs to believe. And it's worth noting that Jesus has scars. That's a whole other discussion, but it's worth noting that the perfected, risen Jesus has his scars, and it's his scars that prove who he is to Thomas. And then Thomas has the exclamation about, my Lord, my God. And then Jesus' affirmation of him, but then his affirmation of everybody who is to come after him, which is the rest of us who haven't seen but believe anyway. So there's this wonderful story of grace for Thomas, but Jesus' line, I think, offers us immense grace as well. For you who will not be able to touch the scars, blessed are you for believing, though you have not seen.
Mm. It also makes me think too, for those of us who haven't seen yet, will still see.
Yes.
One day, because we look to Jesus's return and know that, the fulfillment of our salvation is to, is full communion with him and our Father and the Holy Spirit, and, looking forward to that. And I guess it's something to reflect on too. It does take faith to believe, but knowing that grace has been extended and that, we will know the fullness of the resurrected Jesus.
Yeah, in the Nicene Creed, it talks about believing in both the Catholic and Apostolic Church. When it says Catholic, it means universal, but it says the Apostolic Church. What that's pointing to is the belief in the message of the apostles. So for those of us who believe now, we're believing hopefully because of experience of God that we've had ourselves, but we're also trusting the story that has been handed down from generation to generation to generation that started with the apostles and their eyewitness testimony. So for many of us, that includes Thomas. Thomas was someone who got to see and to touch his scars. And Thomas then told other people about his experience. Then others told the story of Thomas. And then others told the story of Thomas. Those words have been passed down for 2,000 years. So you and I are sitting here and having this conversation because 2,000 years ago, Jesus appeared in a room to Thomas and the other disciples. Thomas got to touch those scars. We trust that story, as many have before us for 2,000 years. And we look forward to the time where we get to do it for ourselves.
I love you said at the beginning, Thomas is a disciple for all of us. And I think, very much we can see our story and his story as well. Hey, Frank, thank you so much for being a part of the show this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on Rhema. Now, if you found value in today's content, hit that like button. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to our channel with the subscribe button. This really helps us to continue to produce more quality content for you. And hey, if you'd like to stay updated and never miss any of our future videos, ring that notification bell as well. Don't forget to follow us on our other socials, which are in the description below. And until then, stay tuned.